Welcome to Libyth. I'm glad you're here. We are in the last block of our series on the Pillow Book, and today we finish the thematic analysis. We have two themes remaining: micro-judgments of others and status anxiety and social comparison. These two themes are the ones that cut deepest into Shonagon's psychology and into the cultural logic of the world she inhabited. They are also the themes that most directly connect to the experience of reading the book today, because the contemporary reader, encountering Shonagon's relentless assessment of other people, immediately recognizes something. Not the content, not the wrong robes or the misquoted poem or the graceless exit, but the structure. The structure of perpetual evaluation. The structure of a consciousness that cannot encounter another person without immediately assessing them, placing them, finding them wanting, or, more rarely, finding them adequate. We all do this. Shonagon just wrote it down. Let us begin with micro-judgments of others, which is the theme that makes the Pillow Book most uncomfortable and most alive. The core of this theme is Shonagon's practice of assessment, her relentless, precise, aesthetically grounded evaluation of the behavior of everyone around her. This assessment operates on everything: clothes, timing, speech, poetry, gesture, the quality of someone's attention, the appropriateness of someone's response to a situation, the degree to which someone understands what the moment requires. Nothing is too small to be assessed. Nothing is exempt from judgment. And the judgment is almost always negative. Or rather, the book records negative judgments far more often than positive ones, because the standard is high and the world mostly fails to meet it. The form this takes in the text is worth examining closely. Shonagon uses what I have been calling the man who construction, or sometimes the woman who, or the person who, to describe a type of behavior rather than a specific individual. A man who has stayed too long at a party, a person who quotes a poem incorrectly, someone who arrives at a lover's chambers making too much noise. These are not specific people. They are categories, universal types, the embodiments of a particular kind of failure. The stripping of individuality is deliberate. It transforms the specific offense into a principle. This is what this kind of failure looks like, what this kind of person is. The universalizing move is also a dominating move. It takes a specific person who failed in a specific moment and converts them into an example, a case study in how not to be. They are no longer a person. They are a lesson. What does she never forgive? The list is instructive. She never forgives vulgarity, broadly defined, but always meaning the failure to understand the level of refinement the situation requires. She never forgives pretension, the performance of a refinement that the person does not actually possess, the cultural claim that exceeds the cultural competence. This is particularly unforgivable because pretension is a kind of fraud. It claims to be what it is not, and in a world where cultural competence is the primary currency, fraud is the worst crime. She never forgives obliviousness, the failure to notice what is happening around you, the failure to read the situation, the failure to understand what the moment requires. Obliviousness is worse than ignorance in her taxonomy, because ignorance might be excused by lack of education, while obliviousness is a failure of attention, a failure to be sufficiently present to the world. What can she forgive? The list here is shorter, but it exists. She can forgive youth. The young person who fails because they have not yet learned is different from the older person who fails because they do not care. She can forgive beauty, There is a generosity in her treatment of beautiful people, an allowance of imperfection that she extends more readily to the lovely than to the plain. This is itself revealing. The beautiful person has already achieved something, has already participated in the aesthetic order that the court values, and their failures can therefore be treated as lapses rather than constitutive failures. She can forgive genuine effort. The person who tries and fails is different from the person who does not try. And she can, on very rare occasions, forgive the person who fails brilliantly, who makes such an interesting or original mistake that the mistake itself becomes a kind of achievement. The hierarchy of failures, worst to least worst, is pretension first, then obliviousness, then vulgarity, then simple incompetence. And at the bottom, barely a failure at all, the person who knows they have failed and shows it. Awareness, even of one's own failure, is already a kind of refinement. It means you have the sensitivity to register the gap between what was required and what you produced. It means the standard is alive in you, even if you failed to meet it. Shonagon can respect that. What she cannot respect is the person who fails without knowing they have failed, who departs the situation intact, unaware of the disaster they have left in their wake. The ethics of all this require examination, because the contemporary reader is right to feel uncomfortable with what is happening here, and I do not want to aestheticize away the discomfort. What Shonagon is doing, the relentless assessment, the taxonomizing of human failure, the conversion of specific people into universal examples of how not to be, is a form of dehumanization. Not in a legal sense, not in a violent sense, but in the specific sense that it refuses to the people being assessed the full interiority that we might grant to ourselves. The man who is not a person in this text. He is a type. He has no context, no inner life, no reason for his failure that might excuse or explain it. He simply fails, and the failure is recorded, and the record is the judgment. This is uncomfortable because we recognize it. We all have an inner Shonagon, a voice that catalogs the failures of the people around us, that notes the wrong gesture at the wrong moment, that finds the graceless exit more memorable than the graceful entrance. Social media has made this visible in ways it was not visible before. The pylon, the ratio, the dunking thread, the collective documentation of someone else's failure. These are digital versions of Shonagon's man who construction, the conversion of a specific person into a universal example of how not to be. The difference is scale, speed, and the asymmetry of power. Shonagon's judgments stayed in a notebook under a pillow, and then circulated among a small, educated elite. The contemporary version circulates to millions in seconds. But the structure is the same. The gaze, the assessment, the record, the judgment. Is it cruelty? Is it aesthetics? In Shonagon's world, as I noted in the previous block, these are not fully separable. The aesthetic failure and the moral failure are the same failure. The failure to bring sufficient care and attention and cultural competence to one's participation in the shared world. And if they are the same failure, then the judgment is not merely aesthetic, it is moral, and the recording of the judgment is not cruelty in the ordinary sense, but a form of moral seriousness. An insistence that behavior matters, that how people treat the world and the standards the world maintains actually matters, that the person who misquotes a poem has done something that deserves to be noted and remembered. But here is the complication that I think the contemporary reader feels acutely, and that the high-end reader may have felt less. Who decides what the standard is? In Shonagon's world, the standard is not arbitrary. It is the accumulated tradition of Chinese and Japanese cultural learning, encoded in the rank system and the ceremonial calendar and the educational practices of the court elite, shared in principle by everyone who moves in the court circles she writes about. The standard is communal. The judgment enforces a communal norm. But the communal norm excludes almost everyone, excludes the poor, the uneducated, the people who live outside the court world, the people who never had access to the cultural inheritance that the court treats as the measure of humanity. The judgment is communal among a very small community, and outside that community it is simply power. The power to decide what counts as human failure, exercised by a tiny elite over a world that never had the chance to develop the competence being demanded of it. Shonagon does not see this. She cannot see it. The limit of her vision is the limit of the world she inhabits, and the world she inhabits is the court, and outside the court is just the provinces, which are cold and dull, and where the people are rustic and unsophisticated and uninteresting. And she never goes there and does not want to go there and is afraid of it as a form of exile. The moral limit of the book is real, and it runs through the micro-judgment theme more visibly than anywhere else. And acknowledging the limit is not the same as dismissing the achievement. Both are true. The book is a masterpiece, and it is cruel. The cruelty is not incidental to the masterpiece. It comes from the same place. Now let us turn to the final theme: status anxiety and social comparison. This is the theme that, I think, unlocks the whole book, the key that makes everything else legible. Because the pillow book is not, in the end, the book of a person who is at ease. It is the book of a person who is performing ease, performing it with extraordinary skill and extraordinary consistency, because ease is what the situation requires, and she cannot afford to be seen to fail the situation. The performance of confidence is built over a structure of anxiety that is the generating condition of everything. The wit, the precision, the relentlessness of the observation, the lists that domesticate the world by naming it, the judgments that establish authority by exercising it. Say Shōnagon's social position, as I described in the context block, is the key. She is the daughter of a Zuryo, a provincial governor. This places her in the class that has the education and wealth to move in court circles, but not the lineage to be fully secure there. She is present in the palace because she is accomplished enough to serve an empress. She is not present in the palace because she belongs there in the way that a Fujiwara woman belongs there. The difference is the difference between being invited and being at home. And she is never fully at home. The court is always slightly on the edge of becoming a place that can exclude her, a place where one wrong move or one political shift will leave her standing outside the gate she has spent her life cultivating access to. The anxiety this produces is not the loud, visible anxiety of someone who doesn't know what they're doing. It is the quiet, productive anxiety of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and knows exactly how much effort it costs, and knows that the effort must never show. The anxiety is the engine. The wit is the product. The lists are the mechanism by which the anxiety is converted into art, by which the need to control the world, to name it and assess it and place everything and everyone in its correct position, is given a form that looks like literary pleasure. Social comparison is structural in the world Shonagon inhabits, not incidental. The Heian rank system made constant comparison unavoidable, because rank was the explicit measure of social worth, and rank was publicly visible in everything. robes, vehicles, the number of servants who attended you, the ceremonial formulas used to address you, where you sat in relation to others in any formal gathering. The court was a world of continuous explicit ranking, and this did not produce a culture that was comfortable with comparison. It produced a culture in which comparison was the primary social act, in which reading the rank signals of everyone around you was the first and most important thing you did in any social situation, and in which your own rank signals were always on display and always being read by everyone else. The surveillance was total and mutual and inescapable. Shonagon's response to this, the response that the book enacts, is to redefine the terms of comparison. If formal rank is the official measure of social worth, and if her formal rank is insufficient to make her fully secure, then she will propose a different measure: aesthetic refinement, cultural competence, the quality of attention. By this measure, by the measure she controls and can demonstrate and has spent her life cultivating, she is the most qualified person in the room. By this measure, the Fujiwara faction that destroyed Teishi's world is composed of people who may have the political power but who lack the aesthetic authority, the cultural depth, the quality of perception that she embodies. By this measure, Shonagon wins. And the book is the record of her winning. This is why the scenes of recognition, the moments when a superior courtier acknowledges her wit, when the empress validates her response, when the emperor is caught by a poem she has produced, are recorded with such barely contained euphoria. These are not just pleasant memories. They are evidence. They are proof that the measure she has proposed is the right measure, that the authority she claims is real, that she belongs in the space she occupies. The recognition from above is the recognition that the alternative hierarchy she has built, the hierarchy of aesthetic competence, is acknowledged even by the people who formally outrank her. The comparison with Murasaki Shikibu is illuminating and worth developing. Murasaki's diary, which we have in addition to the tale of Genji, contains the famous passage criticizing Shonagon. She shows off her Chinese learning, she has a puffed-up attitude, she presumes to compete with people who outrank her, and this will end badly. This is a criticism from within the same world, from someone who understands the system perfectly and is reading Shonagon's performance of it with great accuracy. Murasaki is right that Shonagon is performing above her station. She is also, and this is the thing Murasaki either cannot or will not say, performing it correctly. The performance is not fraudulent. The learning is real, the competence is real, the judgment is sound. The presumption is real. And the presumption is what produces the book. The book as a status claim is worth taking seriously as a proposition. The act of writing the pillow book, the act of producing this record of a life at the court, this demonstration of aesthetic authority, this performance of wit and precision and cultural competence, is itself a claim. It is the claim that Shonagon's perspective is worth preserving, that her angle of vision on the world has value that outlasts the political moment, that what she saw and thought and felt is worth keeping. This is a claim that goes beyond rank. Formal rank is determined by birth and clan and political fortune. The claim that the book makes is determined by the quality of the book itself, by whether the perspective it embodies is, in fact, worth having. And the answer that 1,000 years of readers has given to that question is, yes. Whatever happened to her rank, whatever happened to Teishi's faction, whatever happened to the political world that the book describes, the book is here, and it is extraordinary, and she was right to write it. The impermanence of the world she loved is the final note of this theme and of this block. As she was writing the book, the court she was celebrating was already dissolving. Teishi was dying. The political situation was deteriorating. The beautiful world of Teishi's chambers, with the incense and the poems and the quick exchanges of wit and the shared aesthetic pleasure. This world was already becoming the past as she wrote about it. She knew this. The book is written with the awareness that the thing being recorded is already gone or going. And this gives the book its peculiar quality of both presence and elegy. It is simultaneously celebrating and mourning, simultaneously holding tight and letting go, simultaneously insisting that this was real and acknowledging that it is ending. The anxiety and the beauty are the same. The status anxiety that drives the performance is inseparable from the aesthetic achievement that the performance produces. The fear of losing the world is inseparable from the precision of the attention brought to documenting it. The notebook under the pillow is both hiding and keeping, hiding from the world that might take the book away, keeping the world that is already passing. All of this, all 5 themes, all the wit and the judgment and the lists and the scenes and the performances of effortless authority, comes from the same place. A woman who knew that the world she loved was fragile, and that the only way to make it permanent was to write it down with enough precision and enough love that it would survive the world that produced it. It did survive. We are reading it. That's all for today on Libyth. If you want to follow the whole journey, subscribe, a new book every week.